The luxurious penthouse gleamed under the soft glow of ambient lighting, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Chicago's dazzling skyline. Inside, the atmosphere was anything but serene. Ethan Cole stood by the grand piano, his posture rigid and his hands clenched into fists. Across the room, his parents, Margaret and Gregory Cole, sat with expressions as cold and unyielding as the marble floors beneath their feet. "Ethan," Margaret began, her tone sharp, "this isn't up for debate. The wedding is in a month, and you will marry Charlotte Whitmore." Ethan scoffed, pacing like a caged animal. "Charlotte Whitmore? Are you serious? I barely know her. She's practically a stranger." "She's a Whitmore," Gregory interjected, his deep voice rumbling like thunder. "That's all you need to know. The Whitmore partnership will secure the future of coal industries." "Beneficial for you, maybe," Ethan snapped, turning to face them, "but not for me. I won't marry someone I don't love. This is my life, not a corporate merger." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "Your life is a privilege, Ethan, one that we've worked tirelessly to provide for you." "My responsibilities?" Ethan repeated, his voice rising. "What about my happiness, or does that not matter as long as the company thrives?" Margaret's gaze turned icy. "You're being dramatic. Love isn't the priority here, stability is. Charlotte is a smart, capable woman from a reputable family." "She's perfect for you," Ethan countered, his frustration boiling over. "This isn't about me at all." Gregory stood, his towering frame casting a long shadow across the room. "Enough, Ethan. Either you follow through with this marriage, or you can consider yourself cut off from the family, from the company, from everything." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. "You'd really do that? Disown me for not playing along with your plan?" Margaret stood as well, her gaze unwavering. "We won't have to because you'll do the right thing." The room fell silent, the weight of their ultimatum settling like a lead blanket. Ethan turned away, staring out the massive windows at the glittering city below. "This conversation is over," he said finally, his voice hollow. "Get out." Margaret and Gregory exchanged a glance, then gathered their things and left without another word. The sound of the door closing echoed through the penthouse. Later that evening, Ethan found himself wandering the streets of Chicago, his mind racing. The cool night air bit his skin as he walked aimlessly, trying to think of a way out. He couldn't let his parents control him, but their threats were real. Losing everything he built wasn't an option. As he turned a corner, his steps faltered. A young woman sat on the sidewalk, leaning against the side of a building. Her backpack, worn and frayed, rested beside her, and she was huddled in an oversized jacket that did little to shield her from the cold. Her head lifted as he approached. Revealing striking green eyes framed by messy brown hair, her gaze was wary, but there was a quiet strength in it that caught Ethan off guard. "Spare any change?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Ethan stopped, studying her for a moment. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Leela," she said finally. Ethan's mind raced, a wild idea taking shape. "Leela," he repeated, crouching slightly to meet her gaze. "What if I told you I could change your life?" Her brow furrowed. "I'd say you've been watching too many movies." Penthouse, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of her coffee cup, she looked out the massive windows at the glittering Chicago skyline, a stark contrast to the streets she had called home for the past year. The plush surroundings felt surreal, like a dream she didn't belong in. Ethan sat across from her, watching her carefully. His tailored shirt and polished demeanor were so far removed from her world that she could barely believe they were having this conversation, so she began cautiously, "You want me to marry you just to get out of another marriage?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression calm but resolute. "That's the gist of it." Leela let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "You don't even know me." "That's the point," Ethan replied. "You're not like the people I usually deal with. You're honest, real." Leela's gaze sharpened. You don't know that I could be lying to you right now, then why aren't you? Ethan countered, his eyes steady. Lala looked away, her chest tightening. His confidence unnerved her, but the offer was tempting, too tempting. A year ago Layla's life had been unrecognizable. She had lived in a modest but cozy home with her father, her days filled with music and dreams of performing on grand stages. Her father, a fiercely independent man, had taught her to play the piano and guitar, encouraging her talent at every turn, but everything changed when her father fell ill. The mounting medical bills quickly drained their savings, and the home Lala had grown up in was sold to cover expenses. When he passed, she was left with nothing but a few personal belongings, and her battered guitar pride kept her from asking for help. She tried to make it on her own, playing on street corners and in small coffee shops, but the gigs weren't enough to pay rent. Slowly, she slipped into homelessness, clinging to her music as the only remnant of her old life. Despite her struggles, Lala refused to give up. She survived day by day, guarding her dignity fiercely. Even now, faced with Ethan's outlandish proposal, her instinct was to walk away. I don't know, she said, finally breaking the silence. It sounds insane. Ethan leaned forward, his voice softening. I get it, but this isn't a scam, and it's not about love, it's just a business arrangement. You'll have everything you need: food, clothes, a place to stay, and I'll help you start over. In a year we'll go our separate ways. Lala studied him, her instincts battling her desperation. What's in it for you? My parents, Ethan said, his tone laced with frustration. They're forcing me into an arranged marriage, to merge two companies. If I'm already married, their plan falls apart. Lila frowned. So I'd just be your cover story, essentially, Ethan admitted. But I'll make it worth your while. You'll have complete control over the terms, your privacy, your freedom, everything. Lila's finger tightened around her cup. The idea of tying herself to a stranger felt dangerous, but so was the alternative: returning to the streets with no clear future. And if I say no, she asked, then I'll find someone else, Ethan said honestly, but I hope you'll consider it. She hesitated, weighing her options. The risks were enormous, but so was the opportunity. Fine, she said at last, her voice steady, but if this goes sideways, I'm out. Ethan nodded, relief flashing across his face. Fair enough, I'll have my lawyer draft the paperwork tomorrow. As Ethan walked her to the door, Lila paused, glancing at him over her shoulder. You're taking a big risk, you know. What if I turn out to be a nightmare? Ethan smiled faintly. I guess we'll both be gambling. Lila gave him a small, uncertain smile before stepping into the elevator. As the doors closed, she allowed herself a moment to breathe. What Ethan didn't know, what no one knew, was that Lila wasn't just a struggling musician. She was Layla Hanover, the estranged daughter of Jonathan Hanover, a once powerful business mogul who had fallen from grace in a high-profile scandal years ago. The counter, consider it part of the arrangement. She raised an eyebrow. Right, the arrangement, married one day, strangers the next. He chuckled. It's unconventional, I'll give you that, but you'll be fine. You're tougher than you look. Lala didn't respond, instead taking another sip of coffee and staring out at the skyline. She couldn't help but wonder how long she could keep up this jade. Over the next few weeks, their vastly different lifestyles became increasingly apparent. Lila's independent nature clashed with Ethan's world of wealth and privilege. She insisted on making her own meals instead of relying on the housekeeper. Much to Ethan's amusement, I didn't think it was possible to burn eggs, Ethan teased one morning as she scraped a charred mess off a pan. Don't start with me, Mr. Perfect, Lila shot back, though her lips twitched with a reluctant smile. Despite the awkward start, they found a surprising rhythm. Ethan was impressed by Lila's quick wit and sharp observations, while Lila began to see glimpses of vulnerability beneath Ethan's confident exterior. One night, she found him in his home office staring at a photo on his desk. It was a picture of Ethan as a child sitting on his father's lap. You look happy, she said, leaning against the doorway. Ethan glanced up, startled, before turning the photo face down. Appearances can be deceiving. Lila stepped closer, her curiosity piqued. What happened? Ethan hesitated, then sighed. My parents have always been controlling. They see me as an extension of the company, not as a person. My entire life has been about meeting their expectations. Lila frowned. That sounds exhausting. It is, Ethan admitted. That's why I had to get out this whole marriage thing. It's not just about defying them. It's about proving I can make my own choices. Lila nodded slowly, her initial skepticism softening. I get it more than you know. One evening, unable to sleep, Ethan wandered through the penthouse and heard faint music coming from the living room. He followed the sound and found Lila sitting at the old upright piano tucked into the corner. Her fingers danced over the keys, creating a haunting melody that filled the space. She was so absorbed in the music that she didn't notice him at first. "You're incredible," Ethan said softly when the piece ended. Lila jumped, turning to face him. "I didn't know anyone was listening." "I didn't know you could play," he replied, stepping closer. "Why didn't you tell me?" She shrugged, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's not something I talk about much, just a part of my past I'd rather keep private." Ethan studied her, sensing there was more to the story, but he didn't push. "Well, you should play more often. You've got real talent." Lila offered a small smile. Maybe. The arrangement faced its first true test at a charity gala a few weeks later. "What about her?" "She's not who she claims to be," Margaret said. "Come to the house now." The tension in the Cole mansion was palpable as Ethan entered the study. Margaret stood by the desk, the dossier open and ready. "What's this about?" Ethan asked, his patience thinning. Margaret gestured to the documents. "Your wife Leela is Leela Hanover. Ring any bells?" Ethan frowned, stepping closer to scan the pages. His eyes widened as the pieces fell into place. "Hanover, as in Jonathan Hanover?" "Yes," Margaret confirmed, "the disgraced mogul who lost everything in a corporate fraud." "That's her father." Ethan shook his head, trying to process. "Why didn't she tell me?" "Because she's been hiding it," Margaret said sharply. "Think about it, Ethan. She's using you. This is her way of clawing her family's reputation back from the ashes." Ethan clenched his jaw, his mind spinning. "You don't know that." Margaret stepped closer, her voice low and biting. "Don't be naive. You've been played. She's not some innocent street musician you rescued. She's a Hanover. This was her plan all along." Ethan returned to the penthouse, his thoughts a storm of doubt and anger. Leela was in the living room, sketching something on a notepad. She looked up as he entered, her smile fading at the intensity of his expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting the notepad aside. Ethan crossed his arms, his tone colder than she'd ever heard. "Why didn't you tell me who you really are?" Leela froze, her breath catching. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb, Leela," Ethan snapped. "I know you're Leela Hanover, daughter of Jonathan Hanover, the man who nearly destroyed countless lives." Leela's face paled, but she stood her ground. "So what? You went digging into my past?" "I didn't," Ethan said sharply. "My mother did, and she thinks you're using me to restore your family's reputation." "Is she right?" Leela's hands balled into fists. "You think I wanted this? You think I chose to be his daughter? I've spent my whole life running from that name." "Then why didn't you tell me?" Ethan demanded. "Why keep it a secret?" "Because it's not who I am," Leela shouted, her voice cracking. "I've spent years trying to escape the shadow of my father's mistakes. The name Hanover ruined my life, Ethan. I lost everything, my home, my family, my dreams. All I've ever wanted was to be Leela, just Leela." Ethan's eyes narrowed, his anger battling with the flicker of understanding her words ignited. "So none of this was real? It was all just convenient?" Leela stared at him, her chest heaving. "You don't get it, do you? I never asked for this arrangement. You came to me. You needed me, and somewhere along the way, I thought maybe, just maybe, you saw me for more than my past. But I was wrong." Ethan looked away, the weight of her words pressing on him. Leela grabbed her backpack, her voice trembling. "You know what? Maybe your mother's right. Maybe I don't belong here, but at least I know who I am. Can you say the same?" She walked past him, her steps quick and determined. "Leela," Ethan called, his voice softer now. She paused at the door, but didn't turn around. "Goodbye, Ethan." And then she was gone. The penthouse felt impossibly quiet. After she left, Ethan sank onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. The truth had shaken him, but the way he'd handled it made his chest ache with regret. He stared at the photo of them from the charity gala, her radiant smile so genuine it made his earlier accusations feel hollow. Ethan buried his head in his hands, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Ethan sat alone in the penthouse, staring at the grand piano in the corner of the room. Back at the penthouse, Ethan couldn't shake the emptiness Lila's absence had left. Desperate to make amends, he turned to CLA, his trusted assistant. "She's amazing, CLA," Ethan said, pacing the room. "And I blew it. I need to fix this." Claire raised an eyebrow. "You're not exactly subtle about it, Ethan." Ethan admitted, "I don't know," running a hand through his hair. "But I can't let her go, not like this." Claire thought for a moment, then smiled. "If music is her world, maybe you should speak her language." Inspired, Ethan threw himself into a plan, reaching out to venue owners and industry professionals. Ethan pulled every string he had to organize a private concert. But this wasn't just any concert, it was for Lila. He tracked her performances, showing up discreetly at one of her gigs to hear her play. Watching her pour her soul into the music, he felt his heart swell with pride and determination. 2 weeks later, Lila received an unexpected invitation. It was a handwritten note delivered to her apartment. "Lila, you deserve to be seen, to be heard. Please come to the Grand Avenue Theatre tomorrow at 7 p.m. E." Curiosity and skepticism warred within her, but something about the note compelled her to go. When Lila arrived at the theatre, her breath caught. The space was intimate yet elegant, lit by soft golden lights that highlighted a grand piano center stage. The small audience consisted of familiar faces from the music industry, people she had admired from afar but never dreamed of meeting. As she stepped inside, a man approached her with a warm smile. "Lila Hanover?" he asked. Lila tensed at the name but nodded. "I've been hearing about your music. I'm excited to hear you play tonight." "Play?" Lila asked, confused. The man gestured toward the stage. "This is your show." Before she could process his words, Ethan appeared, looking nervous but determined. "Ethan," she said, her tone guarded. "What is this?" "It's for you," he said, his voice steady despite the tension. "I wanted the world to see what I see every time you play. This is your dream, Lila. Let me help you achieve it." Her heart raced as she took in the room, the weight of Ethan's words sinking in. "I fell in love with you," Ethan continued, stepping closer. "Not your name or your past, just you. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving it if you'll let me." Lila swallowed hard, her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "Ethan, you didn't just give me a chance, you gave me my dream." He smiled softly. "Then maybe some things are worth another try." That night, Lila stepped onto the stage, her fingers trembling slightly as they hovered over the piano keys. But as she began to play, all her doubts melted away. The audience was captivated, and when she finished her final song, the applause was thunderous. Ethan stood at the back of the room, his chest tight with pride and hope. When the theater emptied, Lila found Ethan waiting for her near the stage. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. "I did," he replied, "because you're worth it." Lila studied him for a long moment, then smiled. "Maybe we both are." As they left the theater together, the rift between them finally felt like it was beginning to heal. Ethan and Lila sat across from each other in the penthouse living room. Ethan stood in the center holding a small velvet box. The remaining crew and a few close friends, including Jenny and CLA, stood in the wings watching quietly. "Ethan," Lila said, her voice trembling slightly. He smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "A year ago, we started something that was supposed to be temporary, a deal, but somewhere along the way, you became my everything. You made me see the world differently, you made me better." Lila's heart pounded as he dropped to one knee, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Lila Hanover, Ethan said, his voice steady, "Will you marry me again, this time forever?" Tears filled Lee's eyes as she stepped closer. "Yes," she said with a laugh, wiping her cheeks, "but no more contracts." The audience in the wings erupted into cheers as Ethan slid the ring onto her finger. Their wedding was a simple yet elegant affair held in a garden under the stars. Guests from all walks of life, Ethan's business associates, Lila's music community, and even a few former rivals came together to celebrate their union. Margaret, dressed in a tasteful lavender gown, approached Lila as the reception began. "I owe you an apology," Margaret said, her tone genuine. "I misjudged you. You've shown strength and grace I didn't think possible." Lila smiled warmly. "Thank you, Margaret, that means more than you know." The two women shared a brief understanding nod before Margaret returned to her table. As the night wore on, Ethan and Lila shared their first dance under a canopy of fairy lights. The world seemed to fade away as they moved in perfect harmony, the soft music enveloping them. "I can't believe how far we've come," Lila whispered. Ethan smiled, his hand tightening around hers. "I can. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." "And to think," Lila said with a laugh, "it all started with a crazy deal." As the stars twinkled above them, they knew that their journey, filled with challenges, heartbreak, and redemption, had brought them to a love neither of them could have imagined. As Ethan and Lila danced under the stars, their story reminds us that love can bloom in the most unexpected places. Even from a marriage of convenience, their journey shows that trust, forgiveness, and resilience can transform any challenge into something extraordinary. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who loves stories of love and redemption. For more heartwarming tales like this, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next inspiring tale.